Okay, we should be live.
All right, ready to go?
Councilor McCann's video.
Okay, we'll get started. There we are. Folks, I will now call the general committee meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our second virtual general committee meeting of Barrie City Council. Obviously, due to the COVID-19 physical distancing measures and the order in council restricting gatherings, general committee is continuing to practice physical distancing. So you can see us all as the Brady Bunch here. All the councillors and the executive management are participating via video conference. We've now got all 11 members of council up on stream. Members of EMT and Chief Name Prize are not visible, but they are here and able to answer questions. I just wanted to remind everybody to mute your microphone unless you are speaking. And if you do want to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom, but you can also just raise your hand in your square, and I will take a speakers list after the two presentations. We do have actually 3 presentations on tonight's agenda, 2 in the public session and 1 in camera. The first presentation will be by myself. It's to give you an update and the community an update on the task forces and the work on COVID response. The second presentation is by Mike Krause, our CAO, regarding the COVID-19 update. And then the third presentation is a confidential labor relations matter related to COVID-19, and we will do that later in closed session. So at this point, I think it's over to me. And if we can share screen, we will get the PowerPoint presentation up on the screen. Great. So, members of General Committee, it's a pleasure to speak with you tonight about the work that's been done over the last few weeks. And I won't give a big introduction to the whole topic, except to say that, of course, these are really been unprecedented days. And in the 3.5 weeks now since the crisis really struck, we have seen virtually every aspect of daily life change. And for many in our community, both in the business community and all of our residents, it's not just been a lot of change to deal with, but some very, very crushing and difficult changes at that. So I wanted to walk you through a little bit what's been done in 2 areas specifically to respond to the crisis in the community. And at the outset, I should say, we've had in our first meeting, we had an update from our CAO. There's been regular communication to you from the emergency control group. Once the city moved over to an emergency footing, which was really on the first day of the crisis, and then formalized and expanded later with the declaration of emergency, it is staff's role, management's role, to make decisions under the emergency circumstances and to lead the response to COVID-19. It is council's role to continue to act as the board of directors to the corporation and to work with our community. And what I want to walk you through is a little bit of how we've tried to start organizing some of that response. So obviously in the first few days of the crisis, and I put the press release up here from March 13th, it seems like years ago now, doesn't it? That was that first press release responding, closing our city rec facilities, noting that meetings were canceled. How much has changed already in less than a month? But in the first few days of the crisis, of course, my work was with ECG to try and message some of these changes in the public health guidance. But we immediately started turning our mind in the mayor's office and with some of our community partners to where will those immediate impacts of the crisis be felt. And the 2 areas that we came up with for focus are vulnerable individuals and the business community. Because obviously very quickly there were a number of businesses that had to shut down in the first few days of the crisis. That list expanded in the coming weeks. And also, we knew there were individuals who, because of their own circumstances, whether because they were seniors or with mobility challenges or marginalized individuals, did not have the resources to ride out even a few days of crisis. So our thought was to mobilize the community organizations to address the urgent needs, both of the business community and of vulnerable residents. And then to use that structure to prepare for next steps and try and address the ongoing needs we see in the community. So we'll start with our work with trying to protect vulnerable residents. So obviously a much increased danger for vulnerable populations because they did not have the ability to isolate within the shelter system, do not have the resources to purchase the kind of things that they need, and in some cases unable to access services. So, we wanted to focus very much on that marginalized population, but also we were very aware that seniors, new Canadians, youth, people with disabilities would struggle with basic needs under the circumstances. So, we wanted to immediately start pushing out information to everybody who needed help, but also to focus on the issue of safe accommodation as an immediate priority and food security, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. We essentially began a process of reaching out to all of the agencies. This started literally on the first weekend of the crisis, and we felt that one of the best ways to do that would be to set up a task force. And I wanted to say that the work that our community agencies have been doing has been absolutely remarkable, and the support that the community has shown for these agencies has also been remarkable. The donations to the food bank, to our shelters, to organizations that like the Red Cross, who serve a population that can't get out for basic needs. The support that we have heard as we've made those calls and stayed in regular touch is remarkable. I also wanted to note later, of course, as we started to do the data gathering efforts, thanks to Councillor Harvey, thank you very much, Councillor Harvey, the option of adding a press 1 if you need help feature to our latest robocall helped us reach people, and we had 193 of the people who answered the robocall press 1 for help, and they've all received callbacks, and I can give you a bit of information on that too. So the task force itself was updated on day 3 of the crisis, and it does meet by conference call. It includes Deputy Mayor Ward, the Dairy Food Bank, the David Busby Center, Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, CARP, Salvation Army Bayside Mission, YMCA, the Dairy Community Health Center, although that composition has changed from time to time as we've moved through the situation. The primary effort that we thought we should undertake, and I really want to thank the members of council who have assisted with this. We knew we needed infrastructure, and we started to think about this over the longer term because, of course, it became immediately obvious that this wasn't going to be something that was going to last a week or two. It was likely something that would last a month or two. And we knew that whatever issues we were seeing today were only going to intensify as the weeks passed, as more people lost their jobs, and as the situation became more challenging, potentially with the healthcare system, and for those social service agencies and volunteer workforces, as they potentially had people that were unable to continue volunteering. So we set up an organized set of data gathering efforts to try and find people in need. Of course, the task force itself was part of that. We have a call list in the mayor's office where we're in touch regularly with about a dozen agencies around the city who assist everything from seniors population to the marginalized population and so forth, the food bank. Barrie Housing's done something wonderful. They have reached out to every single one of our 953 households and contacted all of the tenants to determine if they had needed assistance with their basic needs. And unsurprisingly, there were a large number that did. That effort has been ongoing. They've done amazing work, but they've also been feeding us information so that we knew what the areas of need were in the community. Members of council have been calling long-term care facilities and multi-unit buildings in your own wards. Thank you for the information that you've been feeding back. That's part of the organized effort. And then, of course, we have Facebook groups where people are posting their needs and in many cases are having them fulfilled by volunteers. Once we'd established that system to find people in need, then it became a case of regularly checking in and starting to fulfill those needs. And of course, again, the robocall, which was in the last few days, provided us some information there. And I thank you to Ms. James Reed and Service Barry, who completed all the callbacks. I thought members of council would be interested to know that of the callbacks, 11% were looking for information on city services, 9% on physical distancing rules, especially outdoors. 7% were looking for help with groceries for the food bank. And then there were a wide variety of other questions or inquiries. But that food security piece has become a regular theme. And on the bottom here, I wanted to note that through all of those data gathering efforts, through the reaching out to tenants in Barrie housing, to which is thousands of people, to multi-unit buildings, to the agencies, the number one issue we're seeing so far is food security. Now, I'm happy to say that through the incredible generosity of the community and the work of the food bank and other organizations, all the needs that have been brought to our attention that we have seen so far, we have been able to action and fulfill. But we know there are many others, and they continue to come in day by day. You know, while the capacity in the community to help with food security has been excellent, there is still an anticipation that that's going to grow. We have seen an increase in demand, and we are trying to, through that data gathering, reach out, find the people who need that help. Other identified needs, transportation, obviously money, trying to connect people to benefits. Information, always an issue whenever we're contacting people, and the very real impacts of isolation, particularly for seniors living alone. So quickly, some of the work that the task force has done. On the first call, YMCA and Busby got together to start collaborating in terms of potential isolation and location and support for Busby's activities themselves. We created the social agency hub, and a thank you to Barrie Public Library. There's a staff member from the public library who transitioned into the role of being a coordinator to receive donations that are offered and then connect to the agencies that need them. That's been everything from cleaning supplies to other supplies that have been offered. We tried to help with the move of the shelters to hotel accommodations. I know CAO Prowse may be speaking a little bit later to the human services update from the county. Of course, that's overseen by the county, but there were specific needs that we tried to connect the community in to assist the shelters, and particularly with that restaurant donation program. I know members of council were engaged on that as well by Deputy Mayor Ward with the coordination of calls to restaurants. And I can tell you that was quite successful as well. The food bank in particular received a ton of donations, but so did our shelters. So we're keeping up regularly with the agencies and organizations. We are building some capacity for food bank deliveries. The first deliveries through our Care Kitchen program were made today to residents in the city, and that was deliveries of food hampers. A lot of that's been going on with people helping out their friends and neighbors. The food banks made it easy to apply and become a recipient of food, but we've tried to set up some delivery infrastructure, and they've had the benefit of DriveWise, amazing Barrie company who've had all their vehicles out delivering food for food banks. And a big shout out here, the Barrie Colts. I'm sure everybody, well, hopefully you've heard about this by now, but our very own Barrie Colts have been using the kitchen at the BMC to prepare meals, to donate to the Busby Center, to other agencies, and to the food bank. The Busby Center truck picks up at 2 o'clock, and then there's a city truck at 3 o'clock that transports the remaining meals to the Barrie Food Bank. So thanks to our operations department for the truck. But big thank you, of course, here to the Colts. And this is some of the way that increased demand for food is being met. Okay, on the other area of priority, protecting our economy. We did establish a task force, and talk about that in a moment, but these were the major needs and priorities that were identified in the first few days of the crisis and have evolved over the last few weeks. Obviously, talking to all the industry associations to understand what was happening out there was important, and connecting them where possible to the supports that were emerging. There's been a tremendous amount of best practice sharing, and by that what I mean is a company in a certain sector may receive information from its association in Barrie or nationally or provincially. That information can be very valuable to another company. How to deal with HR issues, how to deal with accessing support, how to deal with the shift to online sales. So there's been a lot of communication among our community bodies. And then we wanted to really look at what were those steps that could be taken to support businesses in terms of preserving jobs and helping them in the first instance to preserve their revenue or shift their revenue model, and in the longer term to help with recovery. So this was the Economic Task Force, also established on day 3 of the crisis. We've had 5 calls to date. These are the members. You will see there the cross-section of the Barrie economy that's represented. The different industry associations, construction association, home builders, tourism. We have representatives from the manufacturing and arts communities, and then of course our business support organizations. A couple of actions I wanted to highlight. The launch of the business support page, and again, can't say enough about Stephanie Schlichter and her department's work to pull together a resource page, and our communications folks in getting that up and online. Thank you very much to those departments. The content was launched the next day. And then there was an initiative to expand an existing program, the Digital Main Street program. And the work that was done there was to pool together the digital agencies in Barrie. We have a tremendous cluster of tech firms here in web design and search engine optimization and others, into a resource pool for businesses to try and get them online as quickly as possible if they weren't. But if they were doing business online, to shift and do a lot more on. And I think one of the great things about this area of focus and the work that's been done is that this is lasting benefit. This will help these businesses after the crisis as well. But in the first instance, particularly for retailers and restaurants, the ability to try and continue doing business online and at least bring in some revenue, we wanted to do everything possible to support that initiative. Our small business center, Dave Hyde and Stephanie and the team did wonderful work here. They have already spoken with over 50 businesses who have accessed the program, and that is in the first, I believe, 5 days. Some of the other actions, we've connected with our MPs and MPPs and tried to flow information in on how to access support. All of the member organizations in one way or another are doing webinars, but I really want to highlight the work of the Chamber of Commerce. If you go on their website, their resource page, there are literally 2 or 3 a day, and all COVID related. The amount of information that they've been able to push out has been tremendous, and they're getting very good participation, often hundreds of companies on those webinars. There have been specific areas of interest and city service issues that have emerged through the task force, and they've been able to be answered by our staff. One example was around building inspections with the Construction Association. And there are now online hubs that have been developed by the Georgian College, the Chamber, ourselves, along with the Small Business Center and the Sandbox. And I would encourage anybody out there watching this meeting tonight to run the business or is involved in one way or another to access these resources. They're not just links. There are events and specific opportunities to participate and network with other businesses who are experiencing the same sort of challenges. And of course, this only complements the fine work that's been done and was done already by the city leadership in deferring or at least allowing the non-payment of property taxes, water and wastewater bills without late fees until July to try and support our business community as well, and other individual measures like allowing loading and unloading 24 hours for grocery stores, no enforcement of parking restrictions, and those sorts of initiatives. Last tonight, members of General Committee, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things we've seen in the community. And what a remarkable city that we have the privilege of serving. Our Barrie Families Unite group on Facebook's up over 8,000 members. The Barrie Live Music Show, who are raising money for Barrie charities online, over 1,500 members. Some of the efforts from the business community have just been remarkable. Aside from great companies like South Medic, who have already been manufacturing medical equipment, we've we've seen many of them switch over to respond to the call to manufactured goods for the COVID-19 response. And the donations to our emergency community needs, Barrie Construction Association, PPE, Electra as well yesterday, Honda Manufacturing, or Honda Canada Manufacturing as well, with donations to hospitals and so forth in our area, and the incredible work of the Colts to make meals. So in conclusion, I just wanted to note our incredible community. What a privilege it is to watch the business community and residents adapt to these changes, to see the way people have been embracing what's necessary right now in terms of retooling their businesses if they can, in terms of changing the way they do business, and of course in our community itself, you know, those incredible examples of parades of support for our healthcare workers, mobile birthday parties, and all of the other things that we've seen happening in and around our city. So on that note, I will conclude with a thank you to all those participating, obviously, in the task forces, but more broadly to our business community, our social service community, for helping everyone, and to members of council for your work as well. That concludes my presentation, members of council, and I'd be happy to take any questions. So, Mr. Nolan, I can't see the list of questions, so I'm going to have you feed me.
Sure. I'm just looking at the few hands going up. I saw Councillor Harvey, Elwin, Rietma, and Natalie Harris. From what I saw.
Okay, we'll start with Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering if we're able to elaborate as to where we see the greatest need right now. Is there any one particular area that we should be focusing on to try and pick up the slack, as I know certain other areas seem to be doing okay? Is there any one particular area that's kind of on the radar as the key spot right now?
So thanks for that question. I would have said until the last sort of 3 or 4 days, I would have said food security. But the capacity so far has met the demand. That is not to say that we should not be encouraging donations to our food bank and our charities. They are going to need to sustain a much increased level of demand going forward. I am concerned that the shelter system in the community, the organizations are, they are supposed to be receiving some provincial financial support soon, but they, to be frank, could always use donations and support. And I would highlight the Women and Children Shelter, among others, of course. I think in terms of the unmet demand, Councillor Harvey, we have not seen a lot so far. The system seemed to be holding up and able to expand. If there was one that concerns me a little bit right now, it's transport. And I think that's because some of the volunteer transportation arrangements have had to be shut down. And also some of the inpatient services are stressed with demand. So that is something that, we have a ton of people out there willing to drive for deliveries. That's not the particular concern. I think in some cases it may be transporting people, and that comes with more of a challenge for a volunteer base. But so far, overall, I would say the system is holding up well. I think the future pressure is definitely going to be on food, and we do need still some transportation solutions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
I actually didn't have a question, didn't raise my hand, but thank you.
All right, Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I thought that was a great presentation, so thank you for that. I was just wondering, on a positive note, is there anything that your team recognizes already that will maybe be implemented going forward that's already been a benefit to logistics or communication with the community that has come from this emergency? Like things that you've enacted and created because this happened I know that's kind of happening in the community where our lives are changing tremendously, but there's a lot of positive that's happening right now too. I was wondering if you've seen that yet.
Yeah, I guess two things in particular I'd highlight there. One is what's happening organically in the community, and I take zero credit for this. This is our incredible residents doing it all themselves. You know, the Facebook groups, it's hard to understate. You know, the group of admins that are running that group are dealing with, you know, constant posts, but they're routing people using the personal message function to allow people to, you know, exchange the information they need without having to post it online. And it connects people for help. I mean, that's the incredible thing about the technology, of course. We're trying to do something of the same thing with some of those requests that we know either are difficult to fulfill by a volunteer on a Facebook group, but could be fulfilled by an agency. And that's really great to see. I think what that's doing is building some infrastructure for connection in the community, for people to be not just connected to one another, but to the services. I think the other thing that we really, you know, one of the gaps we saw early on is, you know, buildings, multi-unit buildings that may have tenants who are really struggling. And some of these buildings are doing it all themselves. Again, they're wonderful sort of neighborhoods, vertical neighborhoods themselves, where neighbors look out for one another. In others, that doesn't happen as much or as easily. And you know, it sounds funny, but sometimes it's even about the built form. If you don't have a hallway or a lobby where people, you know, at least before now, were running into each other and now are hopefully talking to each other from 6 feet, you know, it's easy for people to get lost. And I think that connection, which we're starting to see more and more of, is helping out. But I would say over the longer term, I'm really hoping that the kind of coming together we've seen in the community out of the crisis response already leaves us with a permanent legacy of supporting one another. It builds connections and infrastructure that can last beyond this. And I'm sure that Facebook group's not going to go away once social distancing is over. And I'm sure the connections that have been made there between people who've helped one another out, who didn't know each other at all before that exchange of messages. That, to sound a hopeful note, as you asked, I think is something that's going to be a legacy of this.
Thank you. That's great.
Sorry, who else did we have? Other questions? Okay, if no one else, thank you for those questions, members of the General Committee. I'll hand it over to CAO Prowse for the second presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and members of council. Let's wait for Ryan to queue up the presentation. Take me to the third slide, Ryan. I appreciate that. Members of council, I apologize in advance. My voice is waning in and waning out, so I'm going to do my best to get through. But if it cracks, I apologize in advance. The intent today is to provide a further update to members of council, and certainly the public. As you know, members of council now get multiple updates per day to keep you looped in on the frequent activity, not just in the city of Barrie, but throughout the province and the broader country. As you also know, the City of Barrie Emergency Operations Control Group was activated on March 13, 2020. A state of emergency was declared on March 23rd, 2020. A number of things have changed in just that short period of time. Certainly the Emergency Operations Control Group was activated. Recently, RVH, Royal Victoria Hospital, has joined the control group, which is a nice addition. And we are working with them on potential expansion needs as part of their pandemic planning. From the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, I can tell you that 108 confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 40 recovered, 14 hospitalizations, and 5 deaths throughout Simcoe County. Throughout the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit area. We continue to have evidence of community transmission. Always looking for the good news, I would reiterate the mathematical modeling shows that if we are very good at physical distancing, we can reduce the cases by up to 95%. And that's something that is completely within our control. Maybe the next slide. The next couple of slides, members of council, I'm not going to go into depth, but I provide them for your information. You can see just how fast the information is changing and coming from the province. Oftentimes we're getting releases, multiple releases the same day with multiple pieces of information from the extension of the declaration of the emergency, closure of outdoor amenities, the closure of the school and childcare, and then on April 1st, as they started to introduce additional funding to our communities. The next slide, please, Ryan. April 2nd, we saw additional mental health funding. April 3rd, we saw extended business closures as it related to COVID. That now included direction around marinas and boat launches, which I will touch on later. Support for families during the closures. And most recently, a big assistance, I think, to the first responders was the allowing of the access to the COVID information through first responders. As you can imagine, that's a significant piece of information to be able to share. Some of the privacy restrictions prevented that information from being shared. But I think certainly the wisdom was seen that no matter who's responding to a call, if they're dealing with a potential or an existing COVID patient, they need to have that understanding. So the province was able to work through the legalities of that and provide that relief and that conduit between the different first responders so that they can share that information, which is critical for them. Next slide, please, Ryan. By way of updates related to city services themselves, we have extended the free Barrie Transit. It's now been extended to April 30th. We have announced that Communities in Bloom for 2020 unfortunately would have to be canceled. We have provided notification that special events have been canceled up to and until at least June 7th, easy for me to say. And the marina and boat launch as of tomorrow will be announced that they will be closed. That is by provincial order, with the boat launches being added by recommendation of the Simcoe Municipal District Health Unit. And we have provided notification of the cancellation of our spring session of our recreation programs. Next slide. Some of the new actions in support of our community health. We had launched last week our COVID-19 enforcement line, which is supported by municipal law enforcement, providing a number and an email address from 8 a.m. into the morning till 11 o'clock at night to allow residents to either gain information or lodge complaints if they are concerned about either a business or residents in Barrie not following the direction from the province as it relates to things such as social distancing and facilities and venues that should be closed. In addition, a physical distancing bylaw was enacted requiring a 2-meter distance for individuals unless sharing a household. That included a minimum $500 fine and a maximum fine, excuse me, of $100,000. Next slide. As a result of setting up the new, as we call it, the tip line, the municipal law enforcement has seen just in the last couple of days a total of 641, I'll call them interactions. 271 of those came from routine patrols. We received 159 emails and 36 general phone inquiries. In addition, we received 175 complaints. They broke down as 83 related to gatherings, 42 related to park equipment use, 38 related to questions around businesses being open that shouldn't have been, 12 related to the 2-meter distance requirement. In all cases so far, we've been able to get voluntary compliance. I thought I would just touch briefly. Mayor Lehman talked about the task force, but in addition to the task force as a standalone, the Economic and Creative Development Department have continued to work aggressively with our business community and the broader creative community to ensure that we are trying to plug some of the holes, answer their questions, and provide the information that we can during these certainly very uncertain times. And Economic and Creative Development staff have also been directly engaging with our local manufacturers, the ICI landlords and realtors, artists, and other key businesses to understand the impacts and to ensure companies are aware and connected to all of the available resources. Most of the resources the City of Barrie does not provide, but certainly the conduit to those resources is something we can support them on. By way of new actions, again, supporting the economy, Economic and Creative Development has also provided information on funding available through NGen for collaboration efforts supporting COVID-19, connected several companies directly with RVH to assist with their needs for including masks and gloves. We've provided referral and responses to inquiries related to financial aid programs and application information. And for the arts community, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Economic and Creative Development had awarded the Art Grant Program funds for 2020. Given the circumstances and the challenges for some organizations to deliver on their intended programs for 2020, Economic and Creative Development is preparing a recommendation to Council for addressing the 2020 grant programs, referencing the best practices coming out of the province and other relevant organizations. And that will be coming back to Council in the near future for your deliberation. Next slide. Rick. I won't go into depth on this, members of Council. The Mayor, I think, touched on this as it relates through his task force. Again, the Economic and Creative Development Department continues to support that task force, as well as direct engagement with our community partners. Next slide, please. Give me one more. Construction updates. Thank you. I wanted to advise members of Council, as you're aware, the province has released a number of orders as it relates to essential work in which businesses were allowed to continue. I am happy to say that the latest order identified that the municipal construction in general could proceed. Really, the caveat around that was that it was critical in its need and that the contractors themselves were able to operate in a safe workspace. So the city of Barrie, excuse me, specifically has been able to confirm that what I'll call our 6 primary projects or high-profile projects, which includes the 2 Dunlop pieces of construction, the Harvey Big Bay Point, Mapleview, Innisfil, and I think I'm forgetting one. We've already gone through the process of the evaluation as it relates to the criticality of those projects and the ability of the contractor to deliver those in a safe manner. And I'm pleased to tell you that those definitely will be proceeding. And we are now in the process of reviewing all of the other city contracts and works to ensure that those will be able to proceed in the same manner. At the end of the day, inevitably, some of those projects will be deemed not to be critical and they won't proceed. Our hope is that vast majority can proceed by way of need, criticality, and safe operation. City staff and change. Thank you. Members of Council, as you're well aware, recently the city had to make some difficult decisions and begin the process of laying off positions due to the closures of our community centers and our theaters. And last week we announced that approximately 470 part-time staff were placed on temporary layoff. These positions were obviously not required due to the facilities being idled. And in addition to that, with some of the changes in transit, there were some transit clerks which were also laid off at the same time. In addition to the city specific, the library has also placed some positions on leave. And while we are contemplating further layoffs, this is an assessment process that we have to go through as we review our key services, the resources available to deliver them, and at the end of the day, what those core services are that we're going to provide to the residents of Barrie. That process is ongoing, and I will talk about it a little bit later on this evening, and certainly into additional meetings. Next item. I did want to provide members of council a little bit of visibility. When these things are moving out every single day, sometimes the totality of the work that is done by the different departments probably doesn't stand out, but I think it's worth noting the amazing work done by the communications department. In addition to the previous communications activity, which we've highlighted not only daily but last week, we've also added the who to call in an emergency. We've provided increased signage at parks. Were the drivers behind the approximately 40,000 robocalls that were completed, and the architects of the second wave of robocalls. They provided individual newsletters mailed to all households. We provided banner ads to raise awareness around the stay home and stay apart. And we have taken ads, including up to RVH, to thank the RVH workers on behalf of the city and its residents. And we have added radio ads and online news and websites. Recently, we also did releases around council's support for the 3 free garbage tags. And I can report to council that as of, I believe today, We received just over 3,400 requests for those garbage tags. So there clearly is a pent-up demand to be able to take advantage of that. I think my cautionary tale was we did note last week that over 100 households put out more than 5 garbage bags at their house, which I believe at that point we actually hadn't delivered any of the free garbage tags. So this was people who had them or had purchased them. But the challenge is certainly for our contractors balancing that workload. It was one of our concerns when we weighed the value of offering the free garbage bags. So we are going to continue to message the importance for residents. Utilize the free garbage bags tags, but please limit it to 3 and no more than 3 bags per household. That will ensure that we're able to pick up everybody's garbage without any interruption of service or impact at the landfill as it relates to tonnage. In addition, we also introduced through the media, obviously, support of the tip line, the communications around physical distancing, the extension of the recreation and cultural closures, and unfortunately, the announcements of the temporary layoffs. Next slide. Members of council, I had spoken to you last week as it related to specifically the revenue hit that the city took as it related to our recreational facilities, our theaters, and transit. I wanted to give you a little bit more color in that as we've gone through the process. As I noted earlier, we had started the process of the part-time layoffs, primarily related to the recreation centers. And what I can tell you today is the reductions in costs related to that are about $425,000 a month. Again, the revenue hit was about 1.7. In addition, we've been able to pull about $70,000 in utility costs out of those facilities as we have wound them down and removed the ice, removed the water from the pools, primarily in order to do maintenance, but also to make those venues available for other uses as part of a potential pandemic plan. What I wanted to sort of call out for you today, and you'll actually receive more information around this next week, and so this is a bit of a teaser, but certainly not in a good way. Much of the projection we're doing is really based on unknowns at this point. So we are putting together a financial staff report for members of council that they'll be able to review next week and have some discussion about. In it, it includes certainly some of the financial measures we've already put in place, some that council may wish to consider, and then we start to do some modeling about what the potential impact is for the city as we get into the great unknown of what the impact for the economy is going to be as it relates to COVID-19. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but I can tell you that on a cash flow basis, as we model this out, again, based only on forecast, members of council, we are potentially seeing a difference from our anticipated cash flow to what we are now modeling of approximately $65 million. Now, that is far from cast in stone, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities. But as you know, your staff are doing some heavy lifting to make some tough decisions, and part of the reason we're doing that is around what we can see in the future. Some decisions will need to be made in the near future to protect our financial viability in the longer run. Excuse me. Next, thank you. So I moved from the financial doom and gloom, and I thought I would share a little bit of good news because everybody's looking for good news at these times. So the good news is, and I know Councillor McCann's on there somewhere because I saw him, the street sweeping actually has started already. We had the ability and we had the resources, so we thought we would take advantage of very few cars in the street and fairly dry weather. So the street sweeping actually has already begun, and it is operating as it does in most years, and the information is available online at barrie.ca/streetsweeping. But we will be tentatively scheduled from April 6th to 9th, the Ward 5 subdivision bordering inside Miller and Edgehill and Ferndale, and Ward 8, the subdivision bordering inside Bayview, Essa, Little, in and around Chieftain, Cumberland, and William. And the updated schedule is available on the city's website. Next slide. The other piece of good news, members of council, is that I wanted to advise that before the world changed significantly, members of council had approved the new CIP plan to incentivize the type of development that we are hoping to get in our city, from preserving the built heritage to affordable housing and simple redevelopment grants. And I can tell you today that the CIP uptake has been very good. And in its first round, we have already received 15 applications. And I've broken it down for you there. 4 under the preservation of the built heritage, 5 under the affordable housing grants, and 5 applications for both an affordable housing and redevelopment grant, and 1 application for simply a redevelopment grant. And they are certainly a mixed bag of development opportunities. And the executive staff, as designated, will be going through that and reviewing those to make recommendations. But that's a great indicator, we think, if not development proceeding. Certainly the planning for development is proceeding, and there continues to be significant amount of interest in developing in the city of Barrie. And I think that is indicative in the uptake on the CIP. So we're going to chalk that up to good news. We look forward to great things coming out of that. The other good news I would share, and I'm not going to read it, members of council, but the mayor had talked about some of the great online things that are happening. And I would take the opportunity to call out the social distancing mentorship cycle being offered by Talk is Free Theatre and the Caswell Community Choirs that's been hosting online sing-alongs for all to enjoy. And I think Mayor Lehman talked about the great community as it comes together and continues to innovate in everything they do, from business to social enterprise to social period. And I think that's a testament to the great residents of our city. I did want to give members of council an advance peek to some of the things that we are working to address now. We are already working on what potentially will be the extension of the special event cancellations. As I noted earlier, we've already notified up until June 7th. As we get further into the COVID-19 crisis, it's becoming clearer and clearer that returning to normal is not going to be happening in a week or two. So we are making arrangements around what that would look like, specifically around special events that take an enormous amount of time to plan for. And in fact, whether it be a city event or a private event, oftentimes there's sponsorship that's involved or vendors, and that type of ramp up requires that we provide some sort of clarity around the timing of that. So we're modeling that out, and there'll be more to come for members of council. Certainly the yard sale ban is something that we are going to have to deal with as the weather warms up. Certainly is a popular activity, but as the health unit would remind us, that likely you're going to get more than 4 or 5 people at a yard sale, and that is going to be an issue as it relates to the physical distancing. We continue to have a watch around fire bans. The province had announced them further up north. We continue to take a look at that and how that impacts the city. No recommendations yet, but that's a wait and see. And obviously, as part of our review of the core staffing that we provide, we're modeling what would be a reduced level of service in our city parks. Some of them, as it relates to sports fields and more of the formalized recreation activities that are currently on hiatus, we are modeling what a reduction in service around that would look like, and what the ramp up would be once the world returns to normal. And again, I could have put this under the good news heading. We are looking to push out what will be a virtual Easter egg hunt, and that is being explored through our communications department and our GIS department, which I think it could be a very good news for our community. And the last one, obviously, is stay home. And if you have to go out, stay at least 2 meters away. And with that, I would take any questions.
Okay, we'll just wait till the panel gets up there. Okay, questions, members of General Committee. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Can't help smiling about the virtual Easter egg hunt. That's amazing. And it'll probably help me get through this question about something a little less fun. And that's the financial impact for the city going forward. I'm wondering if CEO Prowse or perhaps Mayor Lehman, through your work with the Large Urban Mayors Caucus, if you've heard of anything in terms of potential stimulus from the provincial and federal government, support for municipalities to deal with the financial impact of this crisis.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. I'll just say a few things, and then CAO Prowse will I'm sure want to chime in. So the provincial government, as you know, in their economic statement, deferred municipal payment of education taxes to the province. So that was a cash flow measure. It's not money for us, but it helps us get through the period where we're going to see a cash flow crunch. I can tell you that's a very live file right now between the municipal sector and the provincial government. There's been a new working group formed between the City of Toronto, the sector, AMO, and the MOU table, and I'm honored to play a role in that on behalf of our sector. That group, the discussion is live. Infrastructure funds is really one of those areas to sort of say, could we assist municipalities with paying for part of the capital budget? But I don't want to make any claim on behalf of the provincial government here. There's no commitment and no sort of direction yet that I can share, except to tell you that I know our friends at AMO, on behalf of all 444 municipalities in Ontario, are working with the government to see what can be extended in the medium and the longer term. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Elwin. I think up until now, at least, the focus from the province has been around cash flow. We are trying to support our residents and businesses. You are trying to support your residents and businesses as it relates to the cash flow piece, because we don't really know how deep the trough will be. So actually, injection of actual cash relief, I think, is difficult to estimate at this point, because they're not sure actually how much it would require. So up until now, it's been around allowing people more time to pay the bills, candidly, and the province has modeled that exact same behavior. So they have allowed us to stretch out the education transfer payment to them. We're working with the county around similar measures, because obviously we write a big check to the county every year for social services. So those conversations are certainly live and ongoing. But at the end of the day, today at least, the province looks to be made whole on that relief, those education tax transfers by December. And what they put in place now requires effectively a double payment in December. So it allows us to buy some time, which we're using to help the residents and our businesses buy some time. But actual cash injection hasn't occurred yet. And I know the mayor is actively involved, certainly through LUMCO, on looking for that cash.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Elwin. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And maybe this is a question, it's related to the last one, but on slide 15, when you mentioned the financial impact, other councils probably have got this question, so I'll throw it out there. I know we've done some things in this regard, but property tax relief, we're getting questions about that. So I'll put it on the table. I know it's a challenging one, but just what might, limitations, et cetera, that people can expect in that regard. Thank you. I guess that's a question for CEO Prowse. Thank you, Marilyn.
Sure.
Through you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you, Councillor Jim Harris. I think up until this point, and we have a very good, I think, network with other municipalities around what everybody is doing. We were one of the first to provide relief to our residents as it related to, I'm going to call it payment terms. And although there has been a smattering of others, there hasn't been any significant movement from that. And the real reason is, I think, is because of the challenge related to it. Municipalities get 9 cents out of every tax dollar collected, and that is an imbalance when it comes to providing any sort of stimulus or relief. And the other piece is I would suggest that municipalities really only have 2 revenue sources. You have your user fees and you have your property taxes. Our user fees have effectively gone to 0. So we are left with property taxes and, to a smaller regard, really, user rates. So we are in, what I describe as tough straits, certainly not impossible straits. And from what we've been seeing and what we've been hearing, the ask today is more around accommodation around payments as opposed to the actual delta of the payments. So I would offer that and say that there's probably more to come And certainly we continue to watch what our peers are doing. And we would certainly be supportive of the province providing some sort of assistance for us to assist others.
So if I might speak to this a little bit as well, I think, you know, the financial condition of our operating budget is a cause for serious concern. I think while we're at the thin end of the wedge, this is how we pay for the essential services that our residents need: police, fire, road maintenance, and so forth. I think if there was to be any discussion of relief, the ring fence budgets that we have, which means you can't spend money in and out on anything else, are water and wastewater. And I've been hearing that call for relief too, Jim, Councillor Harris. People asking, and particularly small businesses who are still getting a bill, even though they're not using any water because of the nature of our billing system. So if there is room to talk about relief, I think that should probably be where council looks. And to that end, Councillor Harvey and myself have been having some discussions around potentially bringing an item forward on that. Councillor Harvey, did you want to speak to this at all?
Sure, Your Worship. Just to add to that, and it's been something we've been working on for a few weeks to try and figure out the best route, and obviously because it would have some financial implications as to where the funds were going to be coming from. But essentially what we're looking at is providing at least a few months of relief that would cut residential bills substantially, most likely through the fixed rate portion. And in turn, that would also eliminate the bills that are going to these businesses that are not open any longer. But I'm hoping that we will have something to move forward with for next week's meeting.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess just by closing note, one of the reasons, you know, Gary and I have been talking with Councillor Harvey and I have been talking about this is if there is going to be any actual relief. I mean, to date, everything has been deferral, helping people with their cash flow, recognizing the intense crunch that many are under, but not ultimately compromising the city's revenue. If we were to do that, actually cut bills in one way or another, we will need to make whole or at least close to it what we were expecting in those budgets, because those budgets do fund important water and wastewater infrastructure around the city. So without you know, going all the way down the rabbit hole, I think there's still some work to be done. And obviously, if we're going to bring anything to propose to general committee, you know, we'll want to make sure that we've got the dollars and the math right to present as well, and our staff will no doubt want to comment. So, but you know, as a general comment, I think property tax relief is extraordinarily risky because the city delivers services that we can't really cut. We can't take costs out at a time when those emergency services are so badly needed and are potentially going to be needed more. You know, we hope not, but potentially going to be needed more. Were there other questions for CIO Browse? Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish off and say thank you. I think it was important for residents, those who have logged in tonight, to hear the challenge limitations with the property tax as an option. And thank you to yourself and Councillor Harvey for thinking about the water bill relief and the potential of that as a strategy. But thank you for the answer, CEO Press, as well on this really, really important issue.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Other questions of Mr. Prowse? Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you. And thank you for both those presentations. Very good. I just wondered if you could expand on the closure of the boat launch, not the marina, the boat launch. I suspect when the weather gets warmer, especially if this continues into May and June and July, we might get questions about why the boat launch is closed. Maybe just expand on why that is being closed. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Ward. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Deputy Mayor Ward. The directive from the province was specific around marinas, but subject to that, we asked the health unit for their advice as it related to the boat launches. As you can imagine, as the weather starts to warm up, they can be a significant area of congregation, and it's virtually impossible to enforce the physical separation as it relates to that. So it was the interpretation and recommendation from the health unit that the direction around marinas should include boat launches.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Any other questions for CAO Press? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to COO Prouse. I know there was some discussion about the parking lots and stuff. Just out of curiosity, we closed the Barrie Sports Complex, where a lot of people use that just as nature walks and they're unable to park. Does that not fall into kind of like the waterfront parking, or is it because of the sports fields that you didn't want to attract people?
Thanks, Councillor Thompson, for the question. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Thompson. I believe the specific target of that was indeed the sports fields in our attempt to close down the sports fields. The Midhurst sports fields are a little unique as they have a singular access that accesses the parking lots and the sports fields. And I believe there was difficulty closing it beyond the main entrance, which unfortunately included the parking lots. So those were not the target, but they were the unintended victims, is how I would describe it.
Thanks.
Any other questions, members of General Committee? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Question for Mr. Prouse. We were talking about the water earlier and about possibly in the future relieving the fixed charge cost. I'm assuming most business tenants have their water under their own name. I'm assuming there's very few cases where the water bill is still under the property owner and it's not separate. I guess where I'm kind of, it's a multifaceted question, is how do we ensure that the discounts get to the right people? So if we do, do discounts for water billing and the accounts are still under landlords or numbered companies, those landlords could just pocket the money, give themselves some cash room, and it's business as usual for the tenants who are paying the water bill. I'll say this question as well, and you can kind of separate them as you will. If we did do, right now we're doing property tax relief, as in deferrals. I believe there's no distinction between residential and commercial. It's just property taxes, period. I'm curious as to see how many of those people who took up on the first offer were commercial tenants of commercial properties, industrial properties, aka landlords. And then I'm wondering, do we have any mechanism where we can ensure that, let's say, a person who owns commercial property X and industrial property B, and they have tenants, if they took advantage of that deferral, that they're passing on those savings to the tenants in the form of a rent reduction proportionate to the tax deferral, and then working out a plan later for saying, you still owe me that money, but let's do a long-term plan. It's just a little bit tricky in terms of that. I am just as cautious as staff about doing discounts or deferrals that affect our long-term sustainability, because I get the long-term, but at the same time, if we're going to do them, I want to make sure that the money goes to the right person in the short term. So my question is both water and then also property taxes. If we were to do deferrals, is there any mechanism that we can ensure, at least on the commercial side? On the residential side, it would just be very, very difficult to do, but at least on the commercial side, I know we have a little more data and more information and it's more achievable. So it's a broad question.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales. Thank you for the question. I think I'll answer them in reverse. The piece around the property taxes, I'd be happy to have Mr. Miller circulate some information to council. I don't believe there is a mechanism where we can require that they pass on that deferral to their tenant. But I'd be happy to have him investigate that and report back if there's interest from members of council. But as I'm sitting here now, I'm going to tell you, I don't believe that we can enforce that piece. The second piece, as it relates to the utilities, I would also request that we can provide you some additional information. I believe the vast majority of businesses that are operating have the utility in their name as opposed to in the landlord's name. There may be some exceptions, but I think that those exceptions are very small. So in that case, although it is, I believe, Councillor Harvey and the mayor's idea around the water or wastewater and the fixed cost piece, I believe certainly in that circumstance, you would be providing that relief to, if your goal is the business, that relief in almost all cases would be going to the business. But I can see if we can validate our information online.
A follow-up question to Councillor Harvey and the mayor. Obviously, we don't have a motion in front of us and it's going to take some more time, and I respect that this idea will evolve before we see it. That said, is it your intent to provide, to not, I'm careful with my language, not waive, but provide some sort of relief on the fixed cost of the water delivery? Is it your intent just for commercial / industrial properties, or also residential properties as well? Or is it up in the air right now?
I think I'm speaking for both of us. Our intent would be all, so both residential and ICI.
Okay. And it wouldn't be an application process. It would just be like the fixed costs are waived, are adjusted for everybody.
Well, yeah, I'll respond to that and let Councillor Harvey chime in. The fixed charge is the piece that you get charged every month regardless of consumption, right? So for a business that's gone to zero on consumption, they're still getting a bill. And to your previous question, you know, the landlord would sort of have to be making up an amount to still charge that to a tenant, because, you know, typically you'd just be passing that along. But on the residential side, you know, the fixed charge is typically about half the bill. We've moved to a higher fixed charge recently, but the other thing I would say is, in speaking with our staff, that is the quickest and simplest way to provide relief on water bills. One could think of many other ways of doing it, a total percentage discount, a reduced consumption charge or something. The quickest and easiest way to give people relief on the bill is to simply eliminate the fixed charge.
Okay. And the reason I bring up the question, Councillor Harvey and Mayor Lehman, I'm 100% supportive of some sort of adjustment on the fixed charge for commercial industrial properties that are, you know, they're not producing output, they're not using, they're still getting charged for that. With residential, it's a little bit more difficult for me. And, you know, I see Councillor Reed not in long. People are home, so they're using it. So like from a, like our people at the commercial properties, industrial properties, no. Okay, so that's just a logical argument. Most people would agree, and you move on. But the other one is people are at home and they are using it. So we're essentially waiving a fee for something people are very likely using consistently, and then getting rid of it. So just the logistics on that, I know it's the easiest piece to get rid of, Mayor Lehman, but I am concerned about the long-term sustainability. That number should scare everybody right now that we saw on the slide, $65 million.
Yeah, so sorry, perhaps Councillor Morales, I didn't mention an important piece. We are only proposing for 2 months.
Okay.
Any further relief would need to be discussed by council. That's not eliminating it for the year or permanently. It's for one billing cycle. And I'm sorry, that is an important piece of what we've been discussing. The fiscal impact of something greater than that would be much more serious. Even this has an impact. I guess I should caution to it, and it's my own fault for getting us down this path. We probably should leave debate on this for next week when the motion's in front of us. I think, you know, Councillor Harvey and I more wanted to provide notice of motion given the discussion of relief that's gone on here. So.
Okay, so not to open debate, these are just comments. When that does come forward, and I'll take the rest offline, it would be nice to see some numbers attached, which I'm sure they're coming, as well as the possibility of doing it as an opt-in instead of just flat everybody does it, as well as numbers to see what if only 50% of the fixed cost is waived, to kind of meet in the middle where you're providing relief, but you're not just waiving it because you're acknowledging people are home. So some sort of variance in those numbers and that information, as well as the feasibility of opt-in, just the way we did with garbage tags. We essentially were going to do a flat, everybody gets more garbage bags, but we decided to do opt-in with garbage tags. So similar model, which all of council approved. So it'd be similar if what the options were. So I'll leave it at that, and I await the information back when we get it.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Morales. Other questions of CAO Kraus on the presentation? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Kraus. And I'm not sure it's possible for council to say it enough. The executive management team of the cities and the senior management team of the city have been working in basically crisis mode now for a month. That's incredibly taxing from a human perspective. It's difficult from a professional perspective. It's difficult to sustain. It's one thing, you know, in a normal disaster, you're dealing with an emergency event, and then it gets easier over time. This one is a winter, not a blizzard, as I said before. Going to be with us for a while, and our executive management team have been working under these circumstances now for a full month. So many other staff as well, and I'm singling them out in part because we're here at council and receiving the presentation, but so have our transit drivers, so have our firefighters, so have our frontline road staff. So many others have had to work under difficult circumstances. So it's a blanket thank you again, but at this moment, at the conclusion of the presentation, I'll say in particular, thank you to our emergency control group and the people who are working such late hours.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to inquiries of staff, and I will start, as always, with the deputy mayor, who is in the bottom right corner of Hollywood Squares. So, Big X, Deputy Mayor Ward, any inquiries of staff? Nope. Others who have inquiries of staff? Okay, seeing none. Announcements, Deputy Mayor Ward, any announcements? Members of General Committee, any announcements? Okay, I do have a few. With Easter fast approaching, of course, I should note there will be no collection of garbage, recyclables, organic, and yard waste on Good Friday. Collection for this day will occur on Saturday. So if your normal garbage day was Friday, please put it out on Saturday. Regular collection will occur on Monday. So there's no holiday delay on Easter Monday and throughout the week next week. Of course, the website, barrie.ca/curbside collection. During the Easter holiday weekend, Barrie Transit services will not be operating on Good Friday or Easter Sunday. The regular weekday service will resume to the current schedule on Easter Monday, April 13th. I know there may be some out there who wonder about that decision because people do use transit to get to grocery stores and so forth. But grocery stores will be closing. This was something announced by the province today. The Premier and the government, I think rightly, are saying that people who work in grocery stores need a break, and they're going to have them close on Friday and Sunday. So that's another public service announcement, I suppose, for those watching at home. Go shopping tomorrow or go shopping on Saturday. But you know, a general announcement about that as well. For anybody who's been to a store or used the delivery services, grocery stores are being restocked, and if there are a few empty spots still on the shelves with certain types of products, I've been consistently noticing in the different stores around the city that I've tried to go to over the last 3 weeks, or 2 weeks anyway, that the restocking is occurring. There's no need to panic shop, and just because the stores are closed Friday or Sunday, don't mean they won't be fully stocked on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday next week as well. Other announcements, a reminder to residents, of course, that our emergency order is in effect. That helps to protect health and safety of residents, of course, while we're fighting COVID-19, prohibits gatherings of 5 or more, regulates the 2-meter physical distancing, and makes it an offense to use closed outdoor equipment, playground equipment, and other equipment in parks. There is more information on the website, and you can call the enforcement line at 739-4241. As CIO Proust noted in this presentation, people have been pretty good about only calling in about violations at gatherings, businesses that are not respecting the need for distancing and so forth. But if you do see violations of that emergency order, that is the number. Also a note, with the closure of the dog off-leash areas, please do not take your dogs to other parks and fields and other areas of the city. We do need you to walk them on leashes and help out everyone else. And a reminder, please maintain the 6-foot separation as you walk along trails and pathways. The courteous way to do that is step off the trail as you pass others to create that 6-meter barrier, 1 hockey stick. We acknowledge this is also a significant weekend for a number of religious communities in our city. Unfortunately, you cannot congregate on church property to celebrate at this time, and that is very difficult, I know, for the Christian and Jewish communities and everyone out there who celebrates at this time of year. However, a number of our religious institutions, our faith communities, have set up alternatives so the congregations can participate from home. So please do contact your local faith leaders about that. There may be an opportunity for you to participate in that way. Of course, even though I recognized the Easter Bunny as an essential service, please refrain from hosting Easter egg hunts in parks or along trails in the city. Alternatives are do them in your yard, putting signs in your window to celebrate Easter, spring, and those working to keep us safe as well. Those signs of support are very much appreciated. I can also confirm the Easter Bunny shall not provide or shall provide such services in compliance with all other orders made under the Act, and shall not be delivering Easter treats to parks or playgrounds. So you need not go look there, as prescribed under Ontario Regulation 10420. Don't I sound like a mayor? The other thing, though, it is an opportunity to do those virtual Easter egg hunts, and watch for more on this for those who are watching. We did want to say two other things in closing. One of the long-term effects as we get deeper into this situation for everybody is the difficulty of maintaining your mental health in the absence of the ways we traditionally socialize, and trying to keep busy and active. And a few things that we wanted to note getting out there. Of course, you can have video conferences with your family and friends, Facebook Messenger, Zoom, Skype, all of those tools that are out there for those who have the technology, or pick up the good old telephone. I can tell you, telephone calls, I stopped getting telephone calls. Everybody started switching to other kinds of messaging. My phone rings a lot. It's really nice. And I'm trying to make other people's phone ring a lot. So call people. It's wonderful to hear their voices. Check on your neighbors. The conversations from doorsteps, front lawns, and balconies, so you're more than 6 feet away, but you're still in person just a little bit further away. I would also note we are seeing an explosion of online classes, free concerts, free activities. I mentioned the Very Live Music Facebook site, which is raising money for charity through a virtual tip jar. But there are so many other things that you can do, and so many of them are free online. This is a great weekend to try that out. And most of all, of course, the opportunity is to support your local business. Some are offering that curbside pickup or delivery of food. There's some that are doing craft items and boxes for kids. So those tools are out there. And if you are watching this and do not have the ability to access some of those things, please do give the organizations and agencies, some of those that I mentioned earlier today, a call, because they can help you with that isolation by helping you with access to services. Last thing I just wanted to note, this is just such an unprecedented time, in our history, and we've watched the way all three levels of government are working together. We are very lucky in this country to see the collaboration that we've seen. And I can tell you that the municipal to provincial to federal is all working really, really well. And I know, we've seen a lot of those comments online, but I wanted to say sort of in closing tonight that feel very fortunate to have the government of Ontario managing the crisis in the way that it is, and the government of Canada managing the crisis in the way that it is, and the reach out that both have offered to our sector as municipalities. It is a very difficult time. I don't mean to blow sunshine where it shouldn't be, but I will tell you that the collaboration that we've seen among members of government and different levels of government right now, setting aside the politics and working with, is wonderful to see. Okay, members of General Committee, we now need to move into closed session to receive the third presentation tonight. I need a motion from a member of council, Councillor Kungle, to move into closed session. I will ask for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand to go into closed session. Okay, that is unanimous. Nobody is opposed. The motion is carried. And at this point, we will adjourn the public session and log back in for the closed session. Thank you to all those watching at home tonight as well.